What makes storytelling in a video game different from storytelling in a movie or a book? That's a big question, but I think the most obvious and most interesting answer is interactivity. When you're reading a novel or watching a film, you are, most of the time anyway, a passive observer, witnessing the characters and what they do. But in a game, there's a unique opportunity to let the player involve themselves in the story. And that makes them uniquely suited to stories involving complex dilemmas and ethical questions, and asking the player what choice they would make in a given scenario. Not every game has to do this, of course. I'd say even a lot of narrative choice-based games are often very black and white in the dilemmas they present. Do you want to rescue the puppies from the burning building, or throw gasoline on the fire and laugh at their whimpers? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Different games have different priorities. But for me, the most fascinating bits of video game storytelling are the ones that make me think. Ones that make me pause the game and agonize over what the right thing to do is. Or reload an earlier save file and lose hours of progress just to make a different choice because I changed my mind or missed some unforeseen consequence. Today, I'm going to go over my favorite quest in one of my favorite games of all time, Fallout 2. And explore how it offers an interesting moral dilemma, provides some excellent world building, and tells a well-written and compelling story in a way that is only possible in the video game medium. First, a little background. The original Fallout begins in the year 2161, 84 years after the Great Atomic War that ravaged the world and destroyed human society as we know it. In the game, we see a world that still struggles to recover from nuclear devastation. Savage raider tribes and mutated monsters roam a desolate wasteland, and those who are lucky enough to escape their wrath still have to worry every day about dying of thirst, hunger, or radiation poisoning. In the islands of civilization that do exist, you'll most often find people living in hollowed-out ruins or shacks cobbled together from pre-war junk. This is not, however, a world that has stagnated. Civilized society, in spite of everything, has survived in places like the Boneyard of Los Angeles, the small but promising village of Shady Sands, and the Hub, which serves as a nexus for trade throughout the various settlements of Southern California. Fast forward to Fallout 2, and another 80 years have passed. It's now been over a century and a half since the Great War, and humanity has moved on quite a bit. The Hub, Shady Sands, and the other cities of Southern California have banded together to form the New California Republic, an advanced nation-state with a functional democratic government, laws, and military, where people live with a level of freedom and comfort greater than what their ancestors in the first game could have ever dreamed of. Bottle caps, the currency from Fallout 1, are gone, replaced with NCR-minted gold coins. Just to do a little mini-rant here, something that really bothers me in the later Fallout games is that they went back on this and brought bottle caps back. I can understand why they did it, they're an iconic and recognizable thing from the first Fallout, but having caps still be the currency, and especially having them be the currency throughout every region in the former United States, just feels so lame and artificial to me, and I think kind of betrays this idea of civilization moving forward. That, to me, is the most interesting part of the Fallout setting. It's not post-apocalyptic, not really. It's post-post-apocalyptic. It's not just about people surviving in the aftermath of a nuclear war, it's about them thriving, about the story of humanity continuing, growing, changing, progressing, generations after Armageddon. In Fallout 2, the map consists of Northern California, with parts of Nevada and Southern Oregon sprinkled in for good measure. At the center of many of the game's story beats, including the one we're focusing on today, is a power struggle for control of the region between the New California Republic, Vault City, and the crime families of New Reno. I'll talk more about all three of these shortly, but for now, all we know is that we're from an isolated tribal village called Arroyo, populated by descendants of the Vault Dweller, that's the protagonist of Fallout 1, and his followers. The village has fallen on hard times due to a drought, and we've been tasked to save it by venturing out into the wasteland and looking for a GECK. That's Garden of Eden Creation Kit. Our journey has taken us to Vault City, one of the premier powers of the Northern Wastes. As we approach the city walls, we see the squalid outskirts made up of tin shacks and cages, surrounding an interior wall guarding a pristine city of adobe architecture, clean paved roads, and thriving greenery. We speak to the customs official, hoping to gain entrance into the city proper, and we learn some more information about their society. Namely that their leader is First Citizen Joanne Lynette, and that she's been occupied lately trying to deal with various issues, such as some rather brutal raider attacks that have been hitting the city. This'll be important later, so remember it. Talking to him more and exploring more of the town, we quickly learn two things about Vault City. One, they are extremely insular and hostile to outsiders. The only way we can enter the city as a non-citizen is to either forge the papers or convince an official to give us a day pass. The second thing we learn is that Vault City is very reliant on slavery. On our journey so far, we've already seen that the slave trade is very prevalent throughout the region. We can meet the leader of the Slavers Guild, get attacked by slavers in random encounters, and two of our potential traveling companions have been victims of the trade directly. We met one searching for his sister, who was captured by slavers, and another one was enslaved himself until we freed him. And Vault City happens to be some of the Slavers Guild's best customers. We can even visit the Servant Allocation Center, and if we're a terrible person, sell some of our companions for a little extra cash. Talking to some more city officials, we hear that the raiders are somewhat unusual compared to your average wasteland marauders. They use sophisticated military tactics and expensive weaponry, and whenever they get close to breaching the city's defenses, they retreat. We also hear that the NCR has been aggressive lately in their bid to annex Vault City, promising protection from the raiders if they join the Republic. Interesting stuff, but we're just here to see the First Citizen, who is amazed to learn that our ancestors came from a vault, but unfortunately informs us that they don't have a Gek, having used theirs to build Vault City when they first left their vault. She gives us some quests which are relevant to the main story, but not very relevant to this video. But we can also learn more from her about the goings-on in Vault City, and her special opinions regarding slavery and the outside world.
They are not slaves, they are our servants. We have given them homes, food, clothing, and a purpose. We have given them a life.
Lastly, one other inhabitant of the city stands out among the rest. He doesn't look like the other citizens, lacking their signature Vault jumpsuit, but he is also clearly not a slave, wearing clothes that, in contrast to his unkempt hair and scruffy beard, are clean and well cared for. We see him ranting and raving on the sidewalk, shouting things like, "Slavery shall damn this city! Can you not hear the cries of those that suffer outside our walls? We must open the gates of Vault City and embrace the outside world." Speaking to him, he says his name is Thomas Moore, and that he is a fierce advocate for the abolition of slavery and all other evils practiced in Vault City. "It is time to hear the wailing of our kin outside these walls and let them in. We have more than enough to feed and shelter our brothers. We need not be rich when so many are poor." Okay, that's enough of that. I'll quit with the voice acting. If we express enthusiasm for his ideals, he asks what lengths we would go for his cause. If we say we do whatever needs to be done, he quietly hands us a mysterious briefcase, asking us to deliver it to a man named John Bishop in New Reno. And so, we've finally received our first task in this chain of side quests. Deliver this briefcase, which will in some way help the goal of ending slavery. Before we do that, though, we can go back to Lynette and ask her about Mr. Moore.
Moore? He's a troublemaker. That's what he is. He constantly seeks to convince the citizens to turn Vault City into a democracy, as he calls it, with everyone having a say in laws and decision-making. I call it mob rule. He plays on our sympathies with tales of a plague in the NCR, as if we could take care of the whole world. We have prospered in this world where so many others have failed, and you tell me we need to change? Look at the outside world. Anarchy, depravity, sickness. Vault City is a paradise. Vault City was built through the hard work and suffering of many citizens. The outside world should look to our example and follow it, not sit outside our walls and beg for handouts.
There's clearly not much we can say to convince her, so we say our goodbyes to the First Citizen and continue on our journey. Before long, we've made our way to New Reno. There's a helpful man there to greet us who explains everything we need to know about the city. New Reno is a wretched hive full of drugs, gang warfare, and all other kinds of illicit activity. Rulership, to the extent that it exists, is shared among 4 feuding crime families, each vying for control of the city and for power in the wider world. He can give us a detailed rundown on the different families and their leaders, but he has little to say about the bishops, other than that they operate out of the Shark Club casino, and that Mr. Bishop is an extremely ambitious man who you don't want to mess with. We make our way to the Shark Club, convince the guards to let us through, and meet Mr. Bishop. We give him the briefcase, which we learn contains intel on Vault City and a piece of stolen technology. We also learn some interesting information. Moore isn't just some eccentric activist, he's a spy for the NCR, and is engaged in some sort of conspiracy with the Bishop family against Vault City. We aren't given the full details of what this conspiracy entails, but Bishop does offer us another job. Go to the NCR and assassinate Roger Weston, an influential member of the Republic's Congress. I'll talk about this more in a bit, but I love how the moral ambiguity reveals itself here. When you first get this quest, it seems like a very straightforward, good guy type of thing. Help this good, moral man stop these evil slaveholding jerks. But suddenly, we're being tasked by a mob boss to assassinate a politician. It's our first indication here that things might be a little more complicated than they seem. Before we decide what to do next, there's something more to see here. If we make our way past Bishop's office, which he's weirdly cool with, maybe he thinks we're just going for a swim in this pool, we can sneak into his bedroom where we find a locked safe. After effortlessly disabling the lock, we discover an assortment of loot and 2 very interesting items in particular. The first is a disc containing incriminating information on Bishop's secret deal with the NCR, in which he hires mercenaries to attack Vault City in the hopes that they turn to the Republic for military aid. The second item is a map that shows us where to find the Raiders' base. From here on out, our story diverges in 2 possible directions. I'll go over both and then finally get into my more detailed analysis. If we head over to the Raiders' base, they're immediately hostile upon spotting us. It's a decently challenging fight. There's a lot of them, and like we've heard, they're tactically sophisticated mercenaries with some pretty nasty firepower. One ass-kicking later, though, we can loot some bodies to find the combination code to open this safe. Here we find an account book detailing Bishop's payments to the mercenaries, even more evidence implicating the Bishops and the NCR. So, naturally, we return to Vault City, tell the first citizen the Raiders have been dealt with, and show her what we found.
Of course. They sent mercenaries to murder my people because I wouldn't join their government. I can barely believe it.
We can even rat on our boy Moore here. But regardless of if we do, Lynette has a new task for us.
I need you to go immediately to New California Republic and find Counselor Weston, Roger Weston. Give him the holodisc. That should ensure no more raiders get hired.
As we reach the border of the New California Republic, we see their sprawling capital is just as, if not more advanced than Vault City. And we're told that they have many other cities just like it, with well over 500,000 citizens calling NCR home. Before attending to the task at hand, there's a lot to do and see here. We can meet and even join the NCR Rangers, an elite division of their military that, among other tasks, is dedicated to eradicating slavery throughout the wasteland. We can also be granted an audience with the NCR president.
New Reno? A damn bucket of Brahmin spit. Got every vice there is. We've got to be tough with them if we're going to unify this land. Congress has got to understand that. Well, I'll talk to a snake, but don't expect me to hug him. If you see any of them, you can tell them that, too. No point trying to keep secrets around here. We're negotiating with New Reno for membership in the NCR. They should have some pull with places like Vault City. Most figure we've got to work with New Reno one way or the other. But folks like Weston and the ranchers blame New Reno for rustling the cattle drives between here and Redding. Congressman Weston? One of the biggest Brahmin ranchers around. His spread's on the west side of town. Just don't bring up New Reno if you talk to him. He gets them going. If you're looking for a steady job, you're not that type, are you?
After we've dilly-dallied enough, we can talk our way into Weston's ranch just outside of town and enter his impressive mansion. If we deliver the disc, he thanks us and gives us a disc of his own to deliver to the First Citizen, saying it has the information she needs to expose the NCR New Reno conspiracy. We can also tell him that Bishop sent us to whack him, after which he'll double what we were offered if we instead take out Bishop. This isn't necessary to complete the quest, but it is a decent amount of money if we decide to do it. As for our main task, though, we simply return to Lynette, give her the disc, and the NCR Reno scheme to take over Vault City seems to have been thwarted.
We will not have problems with NCR for a very long time.
The ending slide once you finish the game states that NCR sets limits on its expansion and formally acknowledges Vault City's sovereignty, yet there's no indication that they ever end their slaveholding ways. It also says that Weston and Lynette got married, which, take that for what you will. Circling back to the Bishop route, this path is fairly straightforward. You go down to Weston's ranch, slip him something, and for all anyone else knows, he had a heart attack. You're then tasked with assassinating someone else, the Vice President of NCR, who you can dispose of in a similar way. The ending slide here sees Vault City suffer severe raider attacks in the years to come. The NCR sends a military dispatch to aid them, which quickly turns into an occupation force. The bishops then take full control over New Reno and negotiate for its membership into the Republic, achieving this rise to power through a series of shady deals and many mysterious deaths. Okay, so let's talk about this quest. Once again, I love the way it plays with our expectations. Returning to Lynette and telling her the raiders are gone, it feels very much like the classic RPG good ending type of thing, as does the ending slide. But with the full context in mind, it's hardly that simple. Thomas More, despite being a spy and being allied to some unsavory people, is sincere in his convictions to combat slavery, and we just foiled his plan to do that. But still, if you think the loss of life from raider attacks is too big a price to pay, or if you're against the NCR's corrupt dealings with the Bishop family, who I will note also do profit off the slave trade, or if you're firmly against imperialism in all its forms, I can see why you'd think Vault City keeping its independence is the best option, even if it means allowing their abhorrent practices to continue. Conversely, if you think the NCR is an overall positive force in the world, which I think you'd have a very strong case for seeing the state of things in Fallout 1 and comparing that to this, you can definitely make an argument for why Bishop's ending is the lesser evil. Sure, innocents die and corrupt people thrive, but the Republic expands, bringing with it the political freedoms, economic opportunities, and other benefits that they provide. Vault City's medical technology is made available to the outside world, doubtlessly saving countless lives and greatly improving healthcare throughout the wastes. And, of course, slavery is outlawed. So, in spite of all the ugly things we had to do to get here, isn't this the better option in terms of the greater good? Well, again, some might argue. It's up to you to decide, and there's no right or wrong answer. There is, however, a third option that I've neglected to mention up until this point. If we wipe out the raiders, but don't give Lynette the evidence of who is responsible, the NCR's scheme to take over Vault City isn't fully thwarted. It takes longer, but the ending slide tells us that Vault City stagnated, choking on its own isolationism and xenophobia. They become unable to sustain themselves on their own, being quietly absorbed into the growing NCR rather than suddenly and forcefully conquered. This is, in my very subjective opinion, probably the best option. A nice middle ground between the two that lets you avoid the loss of innocent life, while still eventually seeing the end of slavery and Vault City's entrance into the Republic. Still, I definitely think reasonable people could make well-thought-out arguments against that. If you're super anti-imperialist and/or anti-NCR, seeing them expand like this might be a bad thing to you. Or you could say that this gradual end to Vault City's oppressive regime is too slow, that the immediate violence is worth sparing the slaves of Vault City and poor people of the Wasteland the extra years of suffering that they'd have to endure. Even in what I consider to be the best outcome, it's never totally clear-cut. And that is exactly what you want to do in a choice-based narrative where you want to make your players think. Also, I think this ending is sort of genius in a kind of meta way. When I play a game, especially one I really like, I tend to be a little bit of a completionist. And I think open-ended RPGs especially tend to lend themselves toward that kind of playstyle. I want to finish every quest, I want to see every line of dialogue, explore every location. But this ending isn't unlocked by, say, meeting some other NPC that provides you with a third option. It's unlocked by consciously choosing not to say something, to not continue the quest, to refuse the extra golden experience points you'd get, and to keep an unfinished quest in your Pip-Boy log for the rest of the game. And that's cool. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it a bit, but I think it's really cool. Fallout 2 is a weird game. In some ways, it's kind of the black sheep of the series. At least if we're mostly talking about the 3 Black Isle/Obsidian developed games. While the original game took several years to create and was sort of an under-the-radar smaller B project at Interplay, the company demanded a sequel after it sold well, rushing it to release the very next year with only around 9 months of dev time. The original leads from Fallout 1 left mid-development to start their own company, and in order to meet the deadline, several workers who were already busy making Planescape Torment were brought in to help out. There's a lot of just odd things in Fallout 2. Talking Deathclaws, talking mole rats, talking plants, constant fourth wall breaking jokes, and egregious pop culture references, a lot of which at least some people who worked on the game have expressed regret about in hindsight. And knowing about the game's troubled development, these things read to me as the overworked devs kind of blowing off steam. I've heard mixed opinions about the silly, weird shit in Fallout 2. Some people love it, some people hate it. I'm probably somewhere in the middle. But regardless of your opinion there, I think it's important that it not be the only thing we talk about when remembering this game. Because, as I've hopefully demonstrated in this video, there are some very serious, thought-provoking, and just really well-done pieces of storytelling here. The struggle for Northern California between NCR, Vault City, and New Reno isn't even really that connected to the main plot, which is about searching for a Gek to save your village and eventually leads to you fighting the Enclave. But all of this intrigue and world building going on in the background is just so fascinating and well executed. It feels human, like a real political power struggle from our own real-world history. Like I said at the beginning, the most interesting aspect of Fallout to me is that post-apocalypse, the story of human civilization continuing on, and this questline, I think, exemplifies that beautifully. There's a lot more to it than just this questline, by the way. Another major arc which also presents some interesting moral quandaries concerns the city of Redding, a lucrative mining and cattle ranching town desired by both the NCR and another Reno crime family, the Mordinos, who seek to take control of the town by getting its population hooked on their new hyper-addictive drug, Jet. You can help either NCR or New Reno take over the town, but you can also work with doctors from Vault City to create a cure for Jet addiction. Seems like a good option, but in doing this, you give Vault City more power in the town, leading to them taking it over and bringing their own brand of oppression. Do I think these quests are perfect, or the absolute best choice-based moral dilemma type quests in any RPG? No. But I do think they're very well done, and probably pave the way for other great video game stories later down the line. I see shades of the Vault City Raiders quest all over New Vegas. That game's whole main storyline is centered around a multipolar political struggle, And the complex question of who should control Hoover Dam and the Mojave Wasteland is one people still debate passionately all the time, nearly a decade and a half after that game's release. There are so many great side quests in New Vegas, too, but one I think deserves special mention is the Whitewash. It probably warrants its own video talking about it. To quickly summarize, though, it involves you searching for a missing NCR soldier, who you discover was murdered by this man in order to cover up his theft of water from Republic farmers, something he was doing to help the impoverished community of Westside. And you have to decide whether or not to expose his crime and cut off the water supply to Westside, or to let him keep stealing water, leaving the NCR farmers to suffer and denying justice to the dead soldier. There's more to it than that, but suffice to say, I both look forward to and dread this quest every time I replay New Vegas, because I still have a lot of trouble deciding which choice I think is best. And that feeling is something that can only be achieved through game storytelling. Storytelling where you are directly involved, not just observing people making decisions, but having to make them yourself, determining for yourself what is right and what is wrong, and what direction the plot will go. It's one of the things that makes games unique as an art form, and I absolutely love it when talented writers and designers take full advantage of that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it maybe convinced you to play Fallout 2 if you haven't, or perhaps revisit it if you have. And if you feel like it, maybe leave a comment about your favorite quest from a game, or what you think the best outcome was for the quest I talked about today. But anyway, that's enough from me. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe, love you so much, goodbye.